I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday Tone Tip. On today's video, we're going to talk about ducking delay, ducking reverb, and ducking for other effect types on the AXFX3, FM9, FM3, and on the VP4. I'm on the AXFX3 today. I've got a late 70s 335 plugged straight into the AXFX, and currently I'm using the FAS Stealth Blue amp with my free cab IR. There's a little bit of delay and quite a lot of this 2290 delay on here. You can see the mix is set at 35%. Before we start talking about ducking effects though, I want to demonstrate the effects. So I'm going to play here and pay careful attention to the relative volume levels between the delayed signal and the volume of the guitar when I'm playing. You're going to notice that in the gaps, the delays are a lot louder than when I'm actually playing. So let's have a listen. To quickly contrast that, let's have a listen to exactly the same delay settings except for the ducking function. You could hear when I was on channel B of the delay block, the main guitar sound is getting massively washed out by all of that panning delay. However, when I go back to channel A, when I'm playing, you can barely hear the delay. You can only hear it in the gaps on there. So what's happening is when I'm playing, that delay block is detecting that there's a signal and it's turning down the volume of the delay. However, when I stop playing, it's going to automatically turn that volume back up. So the delays duck under the main guitar signal, hence the name. Now you can apply ducking to the delay, the multitap delay, the reverb, even to the tremolo block. And we're going to take a look at some examples there. But first, I want to show you how to actually set it up and some recommended settings. So with this 2290 with modulation and with any delay in general, we'll start with ducking delays. We want to go to the more section over here. And there is this section in the bottom left called the ducker. And there's three main parameters. We have attenuation. This is how much we want the delay to turn down or how deep we want it to duck. We could set the attenuation to maximum and the delays will totally disappear. By default, nearly every block in here is going to have the attenuation at 0 dB. My suggestion would be to start with 12 dB of attenuation. That will give you enough attenuation so that you can hear that it's definitely being turned down, but the delays aren't going to completely disappear. Then the next two parameters, threshold and release time. Threshold is the minimum level that we need to exceed for those delays to start ducking. And then the release time is how long those delays stay turned down after we stop playing. So if you set a very fast release time, the delays are going to swell straight back up. If we set a longer release time, it's going to take them a lot longer to come back up to the original level on there. I find -40 for the threshold and 100 milliseconds are really good starting points. And then you could experiment with how high or low you want the threshold and also how long or short you want the release time on there. We'll hear those settings as a starting point, but we'll first go to 0 dB. Then when I hit enter, we're going to have 12 dB of attenuation. So you could hear on there by cranking the attenuation, I can make those delays completely disappear. With a short release time on there, the delays immediately snap back to the previous level. With a much longer release time, and especially having a release time that's close to the actual delay time, the delay time on here is a little over 300 milliseconds, and the release was at 300 milliseconds. Normally a delay will start decreasing in volume with each repeat. So if you've got the release time on the ducker close to that delay time on there, you're essentially going to kind of miss a couple of repeats on there, so the delays won't come back quite as cranked. Again, I find that sweet spot somewhere around 100 to 150 milliseconds for what I like on a lead delay. Now, if you were running this in front of the amp, so essentially the delay block's getting your raw guitar signal, then again, you might want to play around with these parameters. You may need more or less attenuation on there. You may need to set the threshold a little bit lower on there, especially say if you were playing a guitar with very mellow pickups like a Strat or something like that. And again, play around with the release time to taste. I think it's always best to start with the extremes and work your way in. But for me, normally 12 to 15 dB of attenuation, the threshold around -40, -50, and the release at 100 to 150 milliseconds is just about right for what I like on a lead delay. Now, we can do the same thing in the multi-tap delay over here. So I've got a really nice quad parallel delay set up. Let's try those suggested settings from the delay block. We'll go -40 dB for the threshold. We'll go for 15 dB of attenuation, and I'll set the release at 120 milliseconds. We get this. There's also an interaction between how much attenuation we're providing and the overall mix. So you can set the mix a little bit higher than you usually would anytime you want to apply some ducking or some attenuation on there. So that works really nicely on those settings in the multi-tap delay block. We can duck reverbs as well. So I'm going to switch over to scene 1 here, where I'm using this Class A 30-watt Brilliant amp model. We'll turn the delay off, and let's go to channel A over here, which is just the large hall reverb. I'm going to set the mix at 50%. I'm going to play on the neck pickup. This is a pretty sweet edge breakup, cleanish tone with a lot of this hall reverb on there. We could apply the same ducking techniques we did with the delay block here, so that we still get those lovely long tails when we're not playing, but it's not going to totally wash out the dry sound on there. So we'll go to the duck plus mod section in the reverb block. And again, let's try similar settings for the ducker. We'll start with -40 for the threshold. Let's go for 12 dB of attenuation, and let's go for 150 milliseconds of release time. We get this now. This can be really effective with reverbs in front of the amp block, particularly spring reverbs, which can make everything a little bit washy and messy, but at the same time, they give you lots of character and lots of that drip and boing. So I'm going to go with the Studio Spring. Let's set the mix at 40% over here. And I've applied in the ducker section a threshold of -60 because this is in front of the amp block. So it's just getting my raw guitar signal. I've gone for 9 dB of attenuation and a faster release time of 50 milliseconds. Let's check this one out now. effective if you want to run some of the longer reverbs or some of the pitched reverbs in front of an amp that has a little bit of breakup. So let's hear the Ursa Major reverb, mix at 40%, and I have cranked the attenuation on the ducker here. I'm actually going to bring the threshold up just a little bit. We get this. With those extreme settings there and running the reverb block in front of the amp, it's almost a totally different effect to what we had at the start of the video. The start of the video was basically some very subtle automation to turn our lead delays down while we're playing and have them turn up in the gaps to fill the sound out. In that case, we almost had these swells or hits happening there with the reverb, all controlled by our playing dynamics. It can be a great way to get some non-traditional tones out of the reverb block. Let's have a look at ducking in the tremolo block before we go, because this can be really handy. What I find with trem, especially running it in front of an amp, is if I have a tremolo sound with enough depth or enough throb for playing chords that it can kind of wash out single note lines. And then if I set up a nice tremolo for my single note lines, it's not intense enough when I'm playing chords and having them sustain. So using ducking can get us around this. We'll start out just hearing it with no ducking. Then I'm going to set the ducking control to noon, or a value of 5 on here. Let's have a listen to that. It's parameters like this that really bring to the forefront the power and the majesty of the whole Fractal effects ecosystem in there. The effects on their own sound fantastic, but giving you real-time dynamic control over them in so many different ways across so many different blocks really makes this special. And you can take it from those early examples where we just had a ducking delay or reverb that lets our leads just pop out in the mix a little bit more, or stuff like this, which gives us effects we may have never heard before. In fact, what I'm going to do is combine all of those. We'll have a duct delay into a duct reverb, but then I'll do a duct spring reverb and a duct tremolo over here. Let's go for the tube spring. Again, I've got those pretty extreme settings in the ducker over there, a bit of ducking in the tremolo, a duct 2290 that's going to be panning around as well. So basically, when I play hard, you're mostly going to be hearing the amp tone on there. And when I back off, you're going to hear all these effects dynamically swell in. If you've got any other questions, let me know in the comments section below. I will put a link to my free IR that I'm using in this video and my blocks library, and I'll see you all on next week's Tuesday Tone Tip. Have some fun with the ducker.